Hello everybody and welcome back to LRN. Today we're going to be discussing the news that the W Series, the final two races of their season, have been cancelled. So it's actually three races because they had one at the Circuit of Americas and a double header in Mexico due over the next few weeks. They have been cancelled due to lack of funding. We're going to go through why that is, why F1 should have done more to help put those races on, and how the W Series should look in the future to avoid this situation happening again, and why Formula One should be doing more to support the formula. So let's kick off with a quick background then about what has happened. But before we do, please make sure to subscribe on the bottom right hand side if you are new to the channel, and hit a like on the video and comment below to let me know your thoughts on all the latest F1 stories. So today it is all about how F1 is implicated in this story and why I think it's an absolute disgrace that F1 have not done more to support the W Series. So the situation is that a couple of weeks ago, a major investor in the W Series has failed to follow through on their contractual obligation to fund the W Series. And that money was needed to fund the last couple of races. Of course, that involves the logistics, the travel, the cars, the drive, everything, right? So they need to have that money to be able to put those races on. And that money has failed to come through. Now, that is a legal issue. That's something that the W Series will deal with away. Obviously, now that these races have been cancelled, I'm sure they'll be going away to try and get that money back because they were contractually obliged to pay the W Series that money as per the contracts that have been signed. But that will happen later down the line. I'm sure that'll be going on in the course. Now, the issue is that therefore, in the week that they had to try and secure funding from elsewhere, they were unable to do so despite being confident that they would, and that means that they can't put the last couple of races on and they've been cancelled. Now, this to me is where Formula One comes into this story. Formula One has made a key point of wanting to support the series. They paraded the women of the W Series at Miami. I can't get the image out of my head of them all being lined up, just being used as props to push the PR machine of F1 and how inclusive they are and how much they are willing to support the women's series and how it's a big part of the future of racing. And, they were used massively to bring women's eyes to the sport of Formula One, as well as course to the W Series itself, but it was used as a propaganda event for Formula One in Miami, and I can't get that image out of my head. And if they're going to do that, if they're going to try and present themselves as forward-thinking, inclusive, wanting to bring more women into the sport, get more women racing drivers into the world of motorsport, how can you then turn around in their time of need when they're struggling to put on an event due to lack of funds, when you consider the amount of money that is in Formula One? So much so, when you look at the cost caps, we're talking about, hundreds of millions of dollars and pounds, $145 million cost cap for the teams at the moment. Why couldn't those teams come together, put a few $1,000,000 in a pot and just say, look, here you go, finish your season? I think that's the first question, because these teams, the drivers in the W Series, a lot of them are actually linked to Formula One teams, whether that be through the junior programs, through sponsorship deals or however, just through their driver programs. They are linked to Formula One teams. So they do have a vested interest in the success of the W Series, but it seems like they're just unwilling to put any money towards it. Now, of course, in an ideal world, the W Series wouldn't even be needed. We would have women and men competing in the lower formulas of F3, F2, to try and compete and eventually get a spot in Formula One. But we know it's been dominated by men over the years, and of course, getting in then as a woman has proven difficult. So the W Series was and is a really good way of bringing women into motorsport where other routes may have been blocked, and giving some people like Jamie Chadwick, who I'm a big fan of. I think she's really, really good spokesman for her sport and for motorsport in general. So as a side note, congratulations to her for her third world championship. I think, similar to Verstappen, it was inevitable she was going to win it this season. But again, I think she's great for the sport, and I'm really happy for her that she's won her third championship. I think it was going to happen anyway, so at least from that point of view, this decision doesn't impact the result in any way. It wasn't like there was 1 or 2 points in it. She was ahead, 50 points ahead. She was going to win the title this season, so at least no one is put out in that sense. So congratulations to her. But the fact is that for this to work moving forward, Formula One need to stand by their messaging that they're an inclusive company. They need to use all this funds and money to actually incorporate the W Series into the process of Formula One. Because now there's murmurs that the W Series won't even be able to be a support for the Formula One moving forward. They'll drop off of traveling the world with Formula One, and they'll probably become a more regional, maybe like a British-based series again, which I don't think they want to see. I think in this day and age, it needs to continue. And if, as I say, if Formula One are going to parade them as this PR machine and propaganda to say, look at us, we're amazing, then they need to return the favour and say, we'll be there in your time of need. And now, from my perspective, this means a full restructuring of the W Series is required. And as I say, I'd love to see it if someone like Jamie Chadwick could go into F3 proper, F2 proper, but at the moment it doesn't seem like that's going to happen. Despite the fact it's not outside of the rules, there is nowhere that says that F3, F2 or F1 is men only. That isn't the case, but I'm sure you can see it is absolutely dominated by men 100%. So breaking in clearly is very difficult, and people can say what they want and the reasons why, but the fact is it isn't a fair crack of the whip. And for that to change and for women to reach a standard where they can prove outright they are as good as the men or deserve to be competing at least in F3 and F2 to show that potentially one day they are legitimately should be considered for a drive in Formula One, they need to have a foundation or a platform to go and do that. And the W Series has been a fantastic option to do so. So the way that this needs to work, in my opinion, is similar to football. So it would be a really easy thing, right? You increase the cost cap limit for the Formula One teams in Formula One, and you essentially put in the contracts that as part of your costs each season, you must run a W Series team alongside your Formula One team, or at least fund one, right? I don't think that'd be particularly difficult. You look at the way they do it in football. Originally, when the football team started to create the women's football team to go along with the men's, of course, the viewing figures were really low, the attendance was really low, but they pushed and pushed and pushed, and now it's getting better and better and better, and more eyes on women's football in general, right? More people are going, of course, helped by recent events in the Euros and other competitions, but in general, the club structure of football has done a great job of supporting women's football in recent years, at the very least. And I think Formula One could go down a similar route, because remember, W Series is roughly the same as Formula 3 in terms of speed of the cars in question, and so it's a much, much smaller budget required to run a W Series team. An absolute fraction of the cost of running a Formula 1 team, so you could easily incorporate it into the budget of a Formula 1 team, and that way they go around the world to certain races. You don't have to do it, you could have a 10, 12, 15 race calendar for the W Series rather than the full 24 races we're going to have now in Formula 1. But they should have it so that they need to push and be included in the W Series. So they have a separate women's team for all of the F1 teams, and then they go around the world with F1 to certain tracks and have their own competition, funded fully by Formula One, retaining the fact that the drivers in W Series do not have to pay to drive. It is funded by Formula One teams and prize money paid out by Formula One. I think that's the way to do it. I think you structure it so it's a full support network. And as I say, if Formula One are going to stand there on the shoulders of the women who are racing and use them as propaganda to show how inclusive they are, when the W Series is in need, F1 need to step up, help them, and actually think, how could we incorporate this into our wider Formula One structure to make this a permanent fixture moving forward and remove the fear from the drivers in the W Series that they could be weeks away from being out of a job, of the W Series collapsing, of everything changing and losing the platform that they now have. That's my views on the W Series. As I say, I think it's an absolute shame that the last couple of races in the W Series won't go ahead. Of course, the contractual issues that they had were really bad. That money should have come in, and lawyers and courts will deal with the fact that that money hasn't come in. But the F1 should have been quick to come in, fund those races, and then look at, for the future, how can we incorporate the W Series into the cost of F1, because we all know the money's there. We all know it is basically loose change to Formula One how much it would cost to fund these W Series teams if they did it all individually and all had a W Series team that they each looked after, right? That to me would be the perfect way to do it. Let me know in the comments below if you agree. Do you think that F1 should be helping the W Series to remain a fixture on the F1 calendar as it moves around the world? Or do you think that in this case they were right to just completely wash their hands of it and ignore the situation? Maybe you think that they are right to have to go off and find their own funding. Let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, just going to thank you so much for watching. Hope you have a great day. Goodbye.